All right. Good afternoon, and welcome to the first presentation in the Fall 2025 Sustainability Research and Practice Seminar at Westchester University. We are thrilled that you are here joining us either in person or online, for those of you who are zooming in. There's Martin right there, helping. This is the beginning of the 9th year of the Sustainability Research and Practice Seminar. And this is the very first semester that we have a full baker's dozen, 13 presentations in the semester. So please keep Wednesday afternoons from 12 to 12:50 open because there are a bunch of amazing presentations. My name is Brad Slam. I'm the director of the Office of Sustainability. My office is very happy to co-sponsor this series with the Office for Research and Sponsored Programs and the Sustainability Council's Scholarly and Creative Activities Committee. So please join us every Wednesday for the rest of the semester. And without further ado, I'm going to pass the podium to our speaker today, Mr. Tim Ferris.
Hey guys. Just to start off with, I was born and raised in New Zealand. I moved here when I was 22, traveling back and forth as a marine engineer. I also have a background in law. So I met my wife while she was backpacking in New Zealand 22 years ago, and I've lived here for about 18 years. Okay, so one of the reasons I got into beekeeping and other agricultural businesses, the beekeeping was to help with pumpkin pollination on their farm, okay, which is up in Wyandotte. Today, I'd like to give a presentation mainly focused on the beekeeping business. We are now one of the largest in the region, and we focus heavily on sustainability. So, I'm going to give you a brief timeline of history of beekeeping in the US, and then our sustainable focus areas, and then go through the breakdown of the harvest of the honey at Westchester University. Okay, fresh off the boat, European honeybees, they're not native. They came across with the early settlers. They used straw skips. They used to destroy the colonies to break them open to harvest the honey. They used to crush it and squeeze it out. Okay. This dude had a revelation of bee space. He worked out that bees will build out beeswax to a 3/8 gap. He also designed removable frames, which allowed for route inspections. Under the current bee law, all bees have to be kept in removable frame hives. Amos Root, he was an entrepreneur developer out of Ohio. He developed the bee smoker. So you can imagine trying to beekeep without pacifying the bees for all those years. You want to have a decent, gentle strain of bees, I tell you. Hey, 1920s, instrumental insemination. You can actually pacify a bee and sedate it using a constant flow of carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide will go through the spirals in the trachea system, keep the bee almost stationary. You can open up the vagina of the bee using vernier technology and inseminate through the vagina and backfilling to the spermatic sac, which is where all the sperm is held. Okay, so before artificial insemination, instrumental insemination was created with honeybees. It's kept its name to pioneer that industry. This is our gear that we do. We also do open mated flights where we use geographical isolation to select our traits. Exporting of honey. Honey from the US and Canada was shipped to Europe in the bulk holds of ships. It would actually crystallize in transportation, and the farmers would get nothing for it because the crystallization at 55 degrees, which is where crystals will form, is the same temperature as the ocean that's traveling across in those bulk holds. So the dice method is actually pasteurize the honey, allowing to increase a finer crystal culture and growing that out so you get a smoother texture. The concept is similar to homemade yogurt, right? When you're doing that. Modern technology uses the fine crystal. So if you get clover honey, it's got a finer crystal. You can actually agitate that about every 5 minutes to 30 seconds for a 48-hour period, and you get a smooth texture. The brown is actually cinnamon, so we got cinnamon flavored creamed honey in that. As for a bad scenario, Varroa mites. They came to the US in 1987. The Varroa is a parasite that will feed on the lipids of the honeybee, which is like the fat content under the cuticle. They basically puncture a hole through and suck the bee to death. They can also add viruses to the bees. A common one is deformed wing virus, where the bees will actually pupate out with no wings on them. Okay. To give you a timeline perspective, early 2000, I think it was March 2000, Varroa mite came to New Zealand. So if you think of New Zealand, it's 1,200 nautical miles from Australia. It's got geographical isolation with both the Tasman and Pacific Ocean, and they got mites. So the mites originally came in from Asia, jumping from the Asian honeybee to the European honeybee. We're now seeing that as a potential threat that the mites that are currently in Asia. Anyone read Time magazine? Okay, Delan Animal Health produced the first bee vaccine in 2023. It was considered one of the best inventions of the year. With using the state APRES and the state veterinarian, we actually got through the system of bureaucracy and were able to bring in the vaccine into Pennsylvania. It uses immune generation priming, so you actually feed the vaccine with sugar mixture to young bees, nurse bees, that will then feed the queen. That genetic code will then pass through to its offspring. Technically, it should pass on to generations below. However, the USDA only allows it to go into that one. Okay. Issues in the industry today. We have parasites, we've got viruses, we've got predators, we've got habitat loss, we've got climate change, and we've got ridiculously high rising costs. Okay. How we are different. You've learned the sustainable term triple and bottom line. We'll go through that next. We have extensive networking skills, and we have the remarkable ability to say yes. Okay, that opens a lot of doors. Okay, social license to operate. So one of the three aspects is the social aspect. We mentor school programs. We do active research with institutions and the USDA. We hold all the licenses and registrations required, okay, to run a successful bee business. Like other beekeepers, we'll do swarm removal. Okay, so in the spring, it's usually through April, May, you can go catch swarms off branches. We use infrared technology to take honeybees that have resided in residences, also into industrial, commercial buildings right the way through. We have contracts with pest exterminator companies to do those removals. We'll also take on the higher ones. So this is down at Kennett Square. We can actually go 30 feet up with scaffolding, cut through bricks in the block, whatever the name of construction-wise. I'm a pretty good engineer. We can remove the bees out. When we get higher, we actually have friends that own a radio tree service down the main line. They would park a bucket truck with a 70-foot boom up, and we can go higher up into like the main line areas where the house is stored. Product creation. Eyelid butter. This took about 4 years to develop. We did this with Dr. Michelle Pendrake. It actually won a national competition last November for innovation in eye care management. You can apply the eyelid butter to the eyelid margin, and it will actually drown Demodex mites. So as we're talking about mites, I've got 20 years of experience of managing mites. We're now branching off into other industries with mite control. Okay. One of those yes conversations was freeze-dried raw jelly. In our lab in New Zealand, I had a call one day saying, "Hey Tim, can you make us some freeze-dried raw jelly?" I said yes, and then 10 minutes later I Googled how to do it. We were good to go within about 2 weeks, and imported a freeze dryer from China, because New Zealand runs their Australasian power supply, the same plug as the whole of Australasia, right? So to make raw jelly, you basically sacrifice the queen. You will do the normal Doolittle grafting method to make a queen, basically introducing a female larvae into a hopelessly queen right hive, and they will grow out and make a new queen. How a queen is made is by food, right? So by increased volumes of raw jelly fed to that larvae, it will change its hormones and develop the cast from a worker to a queen. So at 4 days after the graft, you can go through, take out the cappings, pull out the larvae, and then with a small milk vacuum pump that we use, we can suck out the raw jelly, and you can see it there. In the bottom corner, we're trialing out pollen samples as well. So we're helping with some labs with DNA sampling to work out the Manuka standards at New Zealand. Bee venom. So one thing you can do is harvest bee venom. So rather than aiming for the actual design of the collector itself, We looked further down the supply chain to find a more sustainable way for transport. Traditionally, bee venom is stored as a frozen product, fresh frozen. We were able to develop a nitrogen transfer tank system where we could flood the chamber with nitrogen as an inert gas that would deprive the chamber of oxygen. The oxygen would then not break down the peptide, which is a protein, right? So the compound's about 27 compounds of bee venom. There are currently 2 companies registered in the US that can collect bee venom and through a lab setting to then do immune therapy, which is where you inject bee venom concentrations for saline to build up your resistance to bees. I would like to be third. I'm actually published with Bern University in Switzerland, with the help of Ghent University in Belgium for bee venom research. We're pretty good at supply chain management, working out where there's holes and injuries. Product creation. Chocolates. I actually slipped off a tractor and split my forehead open about 5 years ago. And driving to Paoli Hospital, I was like, bugger this, we have beehives on the plastic surgeon's place, I'll give them a call. So I walked covered in cow shit into a room with white fluffy carpet, bleeding everywhere. And what do you buy a guy that can pretty much go out and do whatever he wants, right? Thank you, gift, make some chocolates. So through a couple of different chocolate companies, when I say couple, I call every chocolate company within a 3/4 of an hour radius. There's only 5. And we met up with Albert. Albert is a Swissman, so we actually get Swiss chocolate. We have these custom molds made, so we actually do bourbon infused honey in little miniature bourbon barrels. Technology, it's all about scale. So in our processing plant, we can do about 200 pounds of honey an hour. That runs from June through to the end of September. The reason why we have 3 extractors, one is one breaks down, we still have 2, and plus when we're doing commercial extraction for smaller beekeepers, like the average beekeeper in the area only has 5 hives in their backyard, a big machine's not going to cut it, it's going to be a waste of use. So we can actually run 3 different lines of extraction at the same time. Robotics. Anyone like to play with robotics? Yes, no, maybe? Okay. So I was able to develop a CNC style table that moves the table across with a unit on it. We had a inquiry order for 6,000 2-ounce hexagonal glass jars a month. So when you're doing the math, hexagonal shapes aren't perfectly round, they jam in a normal conveyor system. So having a moving table allows you to fill a lot of bottles very quickly. Hey, monitoring, tracking trends, patterns. It's all about the weather. We live by the sword, we die by the sword. We can have a good season, we can have a bad season. Knowing what your weather's doing, we don't even have to turn up to the bee yards to know exactly what's happening most of the time. So from a social recap, the legal issues, we have permits, we have insurance. And when I say we have insurance, it usually costs about 1% of our turnover. It covers us for a $2 million incident. Insurance is handy. A lot of beekeepers don't have it when they're in their own backyard because it goes under their homeowners insurance. Exposure, engagement in the community, networking, business to business, institution, government. Environment. Here is Westchester, right in the middle there, university. You can see the green area where our bees fly based on a 3-mile radius. The red circle at the bottom is hives that we manage under contract. And you can see southwest bottom is mainly farmland that doesn't have much floral diversity, so we try and stay out of those areas. The little white shaded area is the gain in overlap that we were missing in radius circles. Big picture, okay, we're not just in Chester County, we do about an hour and a half radius. There's pros and cons. We've got obviously more of a carbon footprint moving backwards and forwards, but at the same time, we get variances with the geographical rainfall. We're not isolated that way, so we average extremely well. Cootstown right at the top is actually Crystal Cave. We did a cutout at the old historical inn, and the site's heading towards Villanova. You're thinking, okay, Villanova, they irrigate their garden through summer, so they actually get a remarkable amount of honey flow because there's a floral sources irrigated. Okay, whereas French Creek State Park, that could burn off like it did last year with the drought that we had and produce very little honey from mid-July on. We're conscious about our emissions. Okay, New Zealand has been part of the Paris Accord for nearly 20 years. From a green footprint, all the businesses that I operate track and measure all the emissions that we do. So in 2024, the average price of fuel was $3.60 that we purchased. We did 1,109 gallons. When you work out the CO2 emissions and work out your footprint. You also need to do a footprint on electricity consumption. Is use versus cost. So if we have a customer that comes in and they only have 5 frames to spin, or that's in a 20 frame extractor, it's the same cost as spinning 20 frames. We'll actually put meters on, we can time how long it takes, and we can also time and measure how much power we use. You can buy green energy, like you can buy energy on your power bill from solar panel plants and things like that. We also do remote stations where we monitor our beehives using wind and solar. In our processing plant, we also have converters and inverters, so we can drop down from solar fields down to 12 volt and back up to either 110 or 240, depending on what machinery we're using. Mixed land use. So you're probably asking, why is Tim showing you a picture of a cornfield that is wind pollinated and not insect pollinated? Okay, that is not just any cornfield. That is a corn maze. Okay, so corn mazes are usually planted later to allow to have green stalks in the fall, so the stalks don't fall over while people are walking through it, which means I can use that front field to put out 200 beehives to mate in the spring. Right, so the corn doesn't come off early enough to do a cover crop, so I use that space for beekeeping as well. Offsets. Here's a picture from New Zealand. I have over the last 6 years developed some of the largest indigenous forestry rights. So these are a totara tree. We're currently looking at totara for a compound called totarol, which is a dried powder from the oil. These trees have a surface rot time of about 75 years because of the oil. Okay, so for an initial investment of about $500 US and 5 weeks walking around the bush, I was able to measure up a hell of a lot of trees doing plot circles, and from that we were able to do sustainable harvesting based on volume placement. So we actually know from plot circles and core increment core numbers with growth models how quickly the trees are going to replace that volume. That way we can actually work out the calculation by burning the piece of timber. You can collect what's known as the total carbon content. With that carbon content, you can work out the math of how much carbon dioxide those trees have absorbed. All right, more research. So we actually got some funding from SAR about 3 years ago, based on reducing the sugar consumption of the bees right through winter. So by raping and pillaging the bees and taking off all their honey that we sell for $8 a pound, we can then replace it with cheaper sugar syrup. By controlling the climate, we can keep the bees at a 40 degrees ambient temperature, which keeps them in a tight cluster, so they'll shiver, but at the same time, they won't fly, which consumes a lot of energy, and at the same time, it's not such a harsh wind chill. On the right, we have a study that we did with the USDA looking at resistance to amitraz. Amitraz is the active ingredient in the Apivar strips, which is a miticide to get rid of the varroa mites. Penn State, I know it's a bad word to say when we're in Westchester, but with their labs, we're actually supplied them with samples. We have no problem with supplying any lab wherever in the world samples to help the development of honeybee nature, the habitat, whatever they need to do and looking at. So we actually supply 22% of all their R&D samples to develop pollen calendars. So every day throughout the season, we collected pollen from 15 hives at Milky Way Farm to develop a pollen calendar, which kind of looks like that. Okay, so we actually know all the resources that the bees are bringing in. They brought in 86 different strains of pollen, so from a diversified aspect, you can see what the bees wanting to feed on. So, which brings me back to AI, right? So growing degree days. Growing degree days is a base model where if the temperature thresholds meets a certain temperature, the plant will grow. So to give you an idea, at apples, for example, at 41 degrees Fahrenheit, they will start growing. If you average that out over the season, you can actually calculate all those hours to get to 400 hours, and that will be when the flowers are in complete bloom. There is information on crops that we harvest, right? All the apples, pears, you can get that all information, but there's very little information on the native floral. So by using the pollen calendar and tracking the weather patterns over a series of years, we'll be able to determine the pollen calendars and nutrient information, basically to create a nectar flow model of what's going to happen. Tracking the rainfall is important. If we get too much rain, it cools the land down, you don't get much of a nectar flow. Queen pheromone. Queen pheromone is passed on by trail facts, which is mouth to mouth inside the hive. We can use isolation with stacking hives with different screens. If you use a gap more than 3/4 of an inch with wire mesh on either side, the bees can't touch each other, so you can actually control the queen pheromone, add multiple queens to a vertical stacked box. My brother-in-law actually planted sunflowers, which have a higher nutritional value at the same time they flowered. The pumpkins were flowering. So I'm like, great one, Thomas. At the same time, we used queen pheromone in little strips, put them on the pig stands, and put them out through the pumpkin field, measured radiuses around those stands to work out if the pheromone was going to increase production, right? And it did. So you can buy commercially ready products that have queen pheromone. Fruit Boost is one. However, for a test application, it cost me $5 a strip in a recycled Starbucks cup from my sister-in-law, compared to like $256 for the spray. Okay, I know what you're thinking, cannabis, right? Oh, there's a nice healthy bud sitting right there. That is actually hemp. With hemp alternative, last year we put beehives out in a hemp field to work out if bees would forage on. So it's not a flowering bud. They don't put any males which have pollen, right? There's no males in the field. However, under extreme stress, honeybees will actually feed on the sticky residue of the bud there. So we were able to send honey out for testing to test the terpenes, which is an indicator of aroma that you can test in honey. We have done a series of grants with hemp alternatives to look at combining hemp seed with honey as a extreme nutrient source for underprivileged. Okay, biohazards, sterilization. Every spring, we actually have a contract with Serogenics, which is in Salem, New Jersey, and we can eradicate bee equipment and get rid of any bacterial diseases in it. So we're the only operation in the country that does this program. However, Cobalt 60, which is the compound that they use to irradiate with, it's becoming very expensive. So we're getting about a 16 to a 20% increase in fees every year, making it no longer sustainable. We are looking at X-ray sterilization up in upstate New York. There's a facility being built there now. We're also looking at X-ray sterilization for sterile insect technology, which is where they will grab like moths, for example, sterilize half the population, let them go, and it reduces the breeding pairs in the wild. That is not the biohazard sign. Okay, so if you see that on packaging, that is actually a good sign. So if you're looking at your herbs, for example, that you buy, they will have that sign on it, and that's basically irradiated food products. Biological nematodes. Okay, fun and games. My wife bought some compost from one of the big box stores, repackaged our bananas and lemons and all those tropical plants that I like to have around the house, and we got a whole lot of fruit flies and gnats. Okay, so the life cycle is usually about a day. We had this problem for about 8 months, and she even repotted. She had my son out there brushing all the compost off the roots of the plants, and I thought, bugger this. So within 48 hours, we put nematodes inside all the pots of the plants, and it broke the life cycle of the plants. So we're actually also able to raise nematodes. So if you don't know what they are, they're a microscopic roundworm, and they will actually be predatory on other insects, especially in the pupae stage. In the stage to the left there, we actually have wax moth larvae, which is an invasive parasite that can go into the hives. They've basically gone through any orifice they can find inside those wax moths and created a bacteria that changes from a clear creamy color to a red. And then within 72 hours, they basically hatch out. I'd like to give a shout out to Westchester's biology department as well. They're actually looking at growing nematodes in a bacterium and basically putting them into a large kettle type structure, which is known as a bioreactor, and they'll be able to breed them in mass production. So an environmental recap, we do extensive monitoring, advanced stewardship, and we're very active in waste, hazards, and environment. Okay, now for the fun stuff, economics, right? You cannot be sustainable if you're not economic. You'll just fizzle out business, okay? The idea in business is to make a profit, and at the same time, you want to have the best impact of the community around you. So when we talk about market share, well, when you have a dud season like we did last year with the drought, a lot of the smaller beekeepers, they basically run out of honey. So you can keep honey for an entire year, like it's got no shelf life, right? As long as you can control the moisture content so it doesn't ferment, it's the most stable product you can have. So you have a difference between volume harvested and gross turnover. We can keep honey for about 1.5 years before we're rotating it out or selling it in bulk to large entities. We have fixed costs like every other business, variable costs, and at the end of the day, subtract it, you get net profit. Our revenue streams, selling bee products, we listed a few today, selling equipment, selling bees, that can be anything from raising queens, which we're doing with those small mating boxes, through to nucleus colonies, it's all cell terminology, and then up to larger hives. We do management, extraction, private label, and bee removal as well. If you have saturated an area with a commodity, or you have got to the price that the consumer is willing to pay, right? So these are economic terms. Then the only other option you've got to do is to reduce your costs. So we do a lot of in-house manufacturing, vertical integration. Right down the list, we'll show you some examples. When you're building something, so we have our own wood workshop, you start up with a large piece of timber, every time you cut it, it becomes a smaller piece of timber. You end up with small pieces of timber that you can't use. Our standard box dimensions are 19 1/8 by 16 1/4. Once we're below that size, got to find another home for it. So what we did was made these miniature boxes with reading. Effectively, our bee boxes for making our queens are all made on product that we can't use for anything else in beekeeping, and we have 20 screws and a little bit of glue in them. Okay, so our queens that we sell for $40 each cost us around 20 cents to production. Everyone's been hearing about tariffs. Okay, the bee industry is not necessarily hurting from it, but all our packaging is imported from other countries. Plastic packaging comes up from Mexico, the glass either comes in from China or Italy. Okay. On the right-hand side, we have our 1 pound squeeze container. I know what you're thinking, oh, plastic, it's not sustainable. Okay. At the same time, 70% of all our turnover with the customer base is buying that 1 pound plastic container. What we're looking at is, at the moment, we have a contract with the USDA to do our own blow molding machine. So by blow molding, we'll be able to do our preforms, which are on the left, heat them up with infrared, and then expand with pressurized clean air on the inside, reducing the volume size of the packaging coming in. Okay. So when I say that is important, the containers are very light, right? Preforms are the same weight as a plastic container. When you ship by container, you either pay the maximum either by weight, you're penalized by weight or by volume, right? So by having a more congested product, we can ship more of them and have less of a carbon footprint. And here's a twist on the story. So you're thinking, oh, dark and gloomy industrial building. That's the first thing that comes to your light. I actually took that photo in February. You can see some snow down on the left-hand side. That is a mothballed power station. It's running about 10 years ago. It's a coal power plant. Okay. I look at it and go, oh, geez, there's an opportunity. Okay, different perspective. Here it is in July. What can you see in that photo? I see a hell of a lot of greenery. What if I told you that property is on 195 acres or 193 acres? Okay, it has a railway siding to get the old coal to the power plant. Railway sidings usually and railway tracks usually follow flat contours, which are near rivers, right? So you have a water supply for your bees. Or when you go to Google Earth, you can actually bring it up. I don't know if you can see the yellow point because there's a lot of yellow there. It's actually got 1,600 acres of forest right around it. So when you're driving up to Reading, you'll see all that forest up on the hill. It's a remarkable site for beekeeping. Ideally, once that power plant is going to repurpose itself into a plastic recycling facility, we'll be able to get it will be recycled plastic, very clean, and we'll be able to do injection molding, which will be able to make the preforms and the caps for our bottles. And we'll be able to do that all locally and then be able to supply other beekeepers in the area. More plastic. Unfortunately, plastic is right the way through the beekeeping industry. It is cheaper to buy single frame plastic units than it is to build the wood and everything else. It's widely accepted in the industry. Okay, so if you're going to go out and buy glass, like we sell glass as well, like glass honey, there's different stages through the processing. If they're storing it into plastic buckets, they're storing it into plastic buckets. If they're using plastic frames, or they could use wooden frames with plastic insets. The reason why we have black frames is because it gives us a better contrast in colour for the eggs of the bees. The eggs look like little grains of white rice, and their first lay they're standing straight out at you, which is pretty hard to see. Then they're leaning over by the second day, the third day they hatch into a little C-shaped larvae. If you looked at Abraham Lincoln on a penny under a microscope, the larvae is smaller than Abraham. Okay. Here's my son holding up the frame, so you can actually see the pupae pattern. We've got a few spots missing. That can either be from pollen or nectar that's in the frame. Usually we can judge the L's, which are the chromosome code for bees, to work out how closely related they are. Okay, standardization, trying to run the same equipment, same management technique right the way through. That way we can visit, even though I'll show you the Westchester slides, we're constantly looking at bee hives, but we know through studying weather patterns, everything else, what's happening with our bees most of the time. It also makes it for a lot more efficient from a processing perspective. We were talking about raising queens earlier. So these are actually queen cells. 8 days of age, queen cells are capped. And then they go through the pupae stage. So through metamorphosis, they'll turn into a young virgin queen. So this is a shout out to Ed Sharp. Ed is looking at and does a Harbo test, which is where they test for varieties of hygiene. So he's basically creating a genetic stock that is resilient to the pest. Okay. If we can transfer all our queens over to the stock line, we can save ourselves about $5,000 a year in pesticides alone, let alone the labour that costs included. Okay. So we have a very active breeding program with Ed at the moment. You're thinking, what is this? Okay, so this is repurposing used industrial equipment. So this is actually a salad dressing making machine that we put on a dolly. We drilled a hole through the side of it and ported a big kahuna cold smoker. So inside this unit, we have a cascading effect of honey that goes through baking trays, and then we can infuse orchard smoke through our honey. Here's another one for you. This is a broken down lobster tank. Yes, I did have a lobster tank with lobster. I used to have a store in Westchester as a market. The ideal aspect of this tank is the transparent side, so we can actually increase the surface area of sunlight going into it to increase the growth of different algae. So we've been looking at spirulina the last few years, and we've also done chlorella. So spirulina has a higher protein content, chlorella has a higher nutrient mineral level together. So we put that into a greenhouse and we can grow the algae. So we use the algae as a protein substitute or an early additive to the bees to develop early larvae. So the bees require the protein for the royal jelly, which is developed in the hypophalangeal gland. If you can control the diet of the bees, you can stimulate a larger population growth. With beneficial mites, we're also looking at feeding the spirulina because they're a protein-based diet. We'd rather feed out spirulina than cross-contaminate any pollen that we collect. Pollen can grow mold and yeast, and you don't want to introduce your mold and yeast into other industries like the mushroom industry. Talking of the mushroom industry, mycelium. So we have built and designed a couple of different size boxes that we have got mycelium growing in. Okay, so these boxes will create a insulation value from the mycelium and also give them beneficial food supplements that they can eat. So about 6 years ago, we blended up as a double extract reishi red cap mushrooms. However, that was the fruiting body, whereas this is a byproduct waste. So it's all about healthy gut biome. So basically digestion in the gut is what controls the honeybee. And that's how a lot of the new medicines, vaccines and stuff are being introduced. Transportation. We used to do everything with equivalents of Ford 150s, Ram 1500s. Recently, we just had an opportunity to upgrade to an F450. I know what you're thinking. Oh, it's a big diesel. It's going to put out a lot of emissions. However, on the flip side, we can haul 3 times as much. So rather than dragging the ass out on a Ford 150 with a big, huge trailer carrying a couple of tons of weight, we can get better fuel economy with this. We can also do more on the same route, servicing the hives. So economic recap, profit, right? You have to be profitable, otherwise you're no longer in the game. Reduce, reuse, repurpose. So even though we talk about recycling, we're looking at the full spectrum of things. Scale. The technology we're applying and the new technology we're looking for is the future growth as well as what our current market supply. You don't have to do it all. You can have partners, contractors, right the way through. A lot of the research that we do, we try and partner with different institutions these days. Use the skills and advisory groups that are around you. In beekeeping, there's quite a few advisory groups. How I got onto the venom side of it was actually with the USDA. Make a phone call. Don't just take the first phone call either. Do 100 if it takes. Okay, Westchester University. We placed 3 hives on the site just before Arbor Day. We harvested 114 pounds. That's actually quite remarkable for the first year. What we did was actually stagger those plastic frames with the drawn and undrawn, which is called checkerboarding, because as we're in an expansion mode, we need to have the bees stimulate with nectar flow, so then carbohydrate to make wax. So the wax is secreted by mirror glands on the abdomen. You have to have a certain age of bee going through to make that wax, and you have to have a certain temperature. It's 11.4 miles from our processing plant one way, so we can do round trip analysis. At the same time, we stop at other stops on the way. We did 5 site visits through the year. It's recommended to most backyard beekeepers to check on their hives every brood cycle at least. Some try and get in there about every 2 weeks. We don't necessarily need to, because we have a management system where we're looking at our bees doing the same method at other sites. We know what's going on. Okay. When we talk about route stops, we'll get into that a little bit more, and GPS tracking on the truck. We're going to put a GPS tracker so we can actually have more data rather than just driving backwards and forwards from our phone. Looking at the power, so with remote units, we can check the meters for how much power consumption. We're using 120 volt supply at 4.555 amps for 53 minutes. So you can work it out on a cost basis and how much energy you're using. Okay, open to any questions. A lot of information. Hopefully we'll get the honey into the cafeterias. We just got to go through that process.
Just gonna pull up the Zoom people too, so if they have questions, they're welcome to ask as well.
Yes.
So a quick question, you're talking about using the radiation to sterilize. Have you tried hydrogen peroxide? Useful about that is that I've used it for anthrax and some other things, and then it just vaporizes and leaves very little residue.
We're doing volume equivalent to through.
They used it for entire buildings.
Yeah. No, we haven't. So we have to use approved things. We have to get experimental permits if we do anything that's not legal. So at the moment, gamma radiation is available to us, and we're still having to research X-ray, right? So even though X-ray has been around a long time for sterilization, it's an approval process. Okay. In saying that, we're very conscious of the products that are going into our hives. And we're talking about miticides, like when we're making medical products that are going around the eyes, we're doing toxicology screening right way through down the range. We're very, even though we're doing a lot of research, we're very cautious in proving it. The eyelid butter actually took 3 weeks to make the product and develop the product, but it took 5 years to go through the testing. Yes.
For the prior slide, which was the Westchester hives there.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little about how you have them set up? Were those mouse guards on the bottom, and it seemed like you had staggered back the supers, and how many supers are there?
Yeah, great questions. Do you mind if I point?
Sure.
Okay, so what John's referring to is the bottom board. We have a guard over here. It's actually a migrational screen. So it's designed to stop mice getting in, so they don't eat your beeswax, your bees through winter, right? They can destroy your hives. It's also the gaps, the archways about 1/4 inch will stop the European hornets flying in. Okay. We look on the other side. We have a deeper chamber here. This is about 9.5 inches in depth. The black frames will go on these boxes, and then we do a single deep management, which is basically one brood chamber. However, we do not use a queen excluder. Okay, so a queen excluder will stop the thorax going through of large insects of a queen and a drone, and the workers can go up through it. So with the slit back there, we actually have a feeding shim, and we have a high top feeder box, inner cover and outer cover. We try from a biosecurity perspective to keep all our equipment on the hives throughout the year, so we don't do any community transfer. Okay, so these frames in these boxes are white frames, so we can detect any color deterioration with dirt, rodents, things like that, right? So it's just a visual. Inside the hive, it's dark, okay? We have it slit back to help with ventilation, because once we get into the heat spells, anything above 86 degrees, the bees will actually stop foraging. They'll sit there and they'll start fanning. So they'll actually punch their bodies over, make a hell of a noise with their wings, and actually try and create a venturi effect with airflow through it to cool it down, okay? The other thing they can do is disperse, so they can actually remove their biomass out of the hive, sit on the front of the hive or down below, which they call bedding, to reduce that heat. So by sliding the box back, you'll get heat coming up through the hive will actually bend the weight of water, right? So you'll get deflection there, and at the same time, the boxes are slightly tilted forward on a solid bottom, so any moisture that runs down the internal face will actually come out the bottom. Okay, so from a harvesting perspective, because we weren't running queen excluders, this hive here actually had brood further up, so we left that box on, and we actually pulled off the four boxes there and the one there. So this hive was only had 3 frames of drawn capped honey when we harvested on, or we pulled it off on Saturday. Okay, so next year they'll actually produce more honey. Okay, because it's resource dependent to make out the comb to give them storage space. So by introducing less new gear to the hives next year, they'll actually produce more, assuming we have good weather, right? We live by the weather. Answer your question?
Yes, so you just keep after you extract them, you put the same honey supers with the same frames back on over the winter?
No. So we've pushed down to 1 deep and 1 medium. We've added Apivar, which is Amitraz as the active ingredient, which is synthetic miticide for the varroa mites. And then we've actually added the same color boxes, but they're different boxes. So we sterilize with UV wands the frames as they go through, and then we put them back in. So the advantage of that is compressing the biomass, so they've got a smaller void to keep warm through winter. And then through that study that we showed you, that environmental control building, we worked out that our average hive consumes about 22 pounds of sugar mass through winter, right? So some being average, some are more, some are less. We usually add around 30 pounds of liquid feed in the top, and then that shim there is 1.25 inches. We can do what's known as mountain cap feeding, where you can put a sheet of newspaper on and pour on dry sugar. We also buy in fondant, so we buy it by the truckload. So we purchased about 3 weeks ago around 300 boxes, 50-pound boxes of fondant. Okay, so in the fall we'll feed out about 16,000 pounds of liquid feed back out to the bees. Okay, so yes, they are different frames, different boxes, same color code. We stuck with the university color palette.
Okay. One last thing, if you ever get the brood, since you don't use the queen excluders, developing up into that first
yeah, they can go all the way to the top.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And do you still try to extract from there, or just leave it be?
We will add a queen excluder usually later in the season. We'll let it hatch out. So brood has for workers has a 22-day cycle. For drones, it's 24. So you can come back in a month. All that will be hatched out. There will be a stain on the frames and the wax. That doesn't affect the quality of the honey. Okay. One of our swarm management techniques is not to use a queen excluder. Okay, so by applying usable lane space above the queen, it's one of the things that stops her from swarming, reduces the chances. Okay, we can also mark our queens and track them. So you can actually paint the thorax. So you can pick up the queen between your fingers and use a paint marker pen. You can actually color code them. You can also glue a micro QR code on the back of them, and you can track all your queens. Any other questions? Yes.
When you said you were doing the research with the bees in the fields, you said that they would like eventually pollinate or go to the like.
Not pollinate, because there's no male flowers there, right?
That was, but only under duress.
Yes.
How do you measure that? And then like, do you put them under duress or like?
No, we don't put them under duress. Okay. No, great question. So last year with the drought, what happened is everything dried up, so there was no nectar flow, right? So the hemp field was actually irrigated, right? So the bud will actually put out a sticky mass. The bees will feed on it. To put that in contrast, the bees are going to feed on anything that is sticky, right? Sugar concentration. They're just looking for sugar. So to give you an example, the Mars Corporation, they had the M&M factory, and some of their product was being discharged, and they couldn't work out why the neighboring bees had funny color honey, right? They were feeding on it. So even though they're foragers in extreme duress, like a dearth, they will scavenge. So there is a subspecies of honeybee called the Cape bee, which is in South Africa, that will actually feed on carcasses on the side of the road. So that's more protein based. So they're slightly different than the dominant carbohydrate diet of honeybees. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions? Come on, guys, ask some questions. Good ones. Think of anything crazy. I've thought of them.
I was wondering, could you describe you mentioned the Amitraz, but are there any other aspects of pest control such as varroa management that you use. I was wondering specifically about formic acid and formic pro, because I read sometimes that you can use it with the supers, and then other people are like, never use it with the supers.
No, that's a great question. So there are organic methods for pest miticides, right? So you can use organic oxalic acid, you can use the formic acid. So the formic acid that is allowed to be used is actually manufactured up in Canada. Nodes is the company that does it. Up there, you can use a 65% concentration and pour it onto a butcher's pad, for example. That is not allowed here, so you have to use the preformed pad. They stopped manufacturing the original, which was the Mitaway quick strips, and now you have to use a product called Formic Pro that's based on a sawdust pad. The issue with that is you cannot use it above 84 degrees. If you go above that, the acid becomes more volatile, and you'll get a mortality, very high mortality rate. Organic standards that are out there. It's just our environmental impacts that are going on around us at the moment are making them less efficient or too hard to use. So when you're doing formic acid, for example, I'm wearing a full face respirator, mask on, rubber gloves. The stuff will burn through leather gloves. Right? It's one of those things. So because we harvest 3 times, and we'll harvest in June, we'll harvest in late July, August, and harvest in September, because we're taking all that honey from the bees. Most backyard beekeepers usually stop harvesting in July. Usually around 13th of July, traditionally, there is a drop in temperature. Whereas if you're managing 5 hives, yes, you can do it in about half an hour. Because we're managing over 600, it takes me about 3 weeks to get around all the hives. I don't have those weather. Okay. And saying that, I do have drums of formic acid at our facility. It's just whether or not I can apply it at the right temperature range so I don't have a high mortality. Okay. Ideally, I'd like to go to the traits with the queens that can handle the mites. And when I say they handle the mites, they'll actually do grooming. So they'll actually chew the mites off the other bees. They'll go through, they'll uncap pupae, they'll pull it off at the pupae stage, things like that. We don't get resistance to the organic acids, which we can do to the synthetic miticides. We rotate the chemicals that we use. So an organic one that we used last year was based off thymol, which is from the thyme plant. So that product is known as ApiGuard in the industry. However, that is also temperature sensitive. Once it gets to a certain point, you actually have to half the dosage of what you're using. Otherwise, you'll get residual leftovers in your wax. So when we test our wax for toxicology, it will actually show this organic. Yes.
So do European honeybees preferentially go for like harvest the nectar and pollinate introduced plants, like crop plants, and
That's a great question.
introduce
Yes and no.
European?
They not necessarily opportunists, but they will do it like what's it called, a dance-off competition named the Waggle Dance. There'll be 900 communication dances and communicate through vibration, distance of travel, distance of direction. So about 10 years ago, we actually built a robotic manipulator in the hive with a cell phone vibrator, so we could actually stop them from flying in a certain direction. So with a slew bearing, we could spin it around, use a computer module to set the vibration off. I contacted a lab in Japan. We worked out the frequency of 165 hertz was optimal, which was based off recording swarms and the waggle dances on the side of the swarms. So yes, you can play around with that. At the same time, there's different nutritional values for different pollen, right? For the floral that's out there. They will dominantly go from a waggle dance that might not necessarily be the most important, best beneficial product out there, fly right past it if it's a very small patch. They'll usually harvest everything of what that